Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, the Deputy Minister, Director General, and other senior officials in the department, and all the members of the Portfolio Committee and the officials from Parliament. I must start by indicating that I will give preliminary comments in response to your introduction. Then the Director General has prepared a presentation to be shared with the members, and I therefore want to start by acknowledging the fact that I have received your letter as the Honorable Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on the 12th of April 2021, and I can confirm that I received the list of questions from the Honorable Chairperson that seeks details on the vaccine acquisition process. The Chair and the Honorable members are aware that whilst we have, throughout the negotiation process, stated that we have entered into non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements. We, however, acknowledge the constitutional obligation to account to Parliament and provide the responses to honorable members as asked. Members, below are the direct responses to the questions that have been raised in the letter by the Honorable the Chairperson. The Department of Health has procured 31 million vaccines from Johnson & Johnson. An initial agreement for 11 million vaccines was signed, and the initial purchase price has been paid. This agreement had included an option for the department to call for 20 more million vaccines after the signing of the initial agreement. This option was immediately exercised to ensure that we secure enough vaccines. Hence, we are now procuring a total of 31 million vaccines from Johnson & Johnson. The conditions of the first agreements have been met. In relation to the second agreement, Johnson & Johnson had put a precondition that no-fault compensation regulations must be published by the 30th of April 2021. I must state that this condition has also been made by Pfizer. We are pleased that yesterday the NCCC accepted the recommendation for the draft regulations to be published for public comments in relation to the no-fault compensation fund. This means that South Africans will have an opportunity to make their inputs and comments on the draft regulations. This will take a period of about 5 days. We wish to emphasize that we recognize that this period is shorter than the usual processes that have been used for normal public consultation that, of course, is followed by Parliament. However, we believe that it gives us an opportunity to implement the vaccine adverse events compensation scheme at the same time as we start to roll out the vaccines, which we will be expecting in the next few days. So let me say next week. It's important also that to us as government, as we will not only be complying with the terms of the agreement, but it will also be a guarantee and assurance to each and every citizen that their rights are fully protected during the process of the vaccination, and that there is sufficient recourse that that are in place should the experience of adverse events occur whilst they're being vaccinated. In the structure of the fund, there has not been any undertaking by any of the manufacturers to make a contribution. So we believe, therefore, that this will be mainly a government-funded exercise. We can therefore say comfortably that we'll be taking into account and processing all the public comments that we receive so that we're in a position to formally gazette the final regulation by the 22nd of April 2020, next week. Honorable Chairperson, as we have publicly announced, we intend for the no-fault compensation fund to be independent and have a credibility and skill that is required. I'm also pleased to inform you that we have now finalized the process of identifying a seasoned retired judge to chair the scheme. In fact, because of the urgent press briefing that we had last night, I had to postpone a planned meeting with the judge, as we were supposed to finalize the formal appointment process and all other administrative matters that are linked thereto. But I can now formally advise that the retired Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo has graciously agreed to assist us with the mammoth task of chairing this first of its kind fund. We believe that his extensive experience as a jurist, including having headed the highest court on the land, the Constitutional Court, and his recent experience in the health-related complexities as the health market inquiry makes him an ideal candidate to be able to oversee all that all claims and processes are followed by the NFC fund to uphold the principles of fairness, transparency, equity, and protect the constitutional rights of our citizens. This therefore shows our preparedness that whilst we have fully indemnified the manufacturers against any third-party claims, we also put in place sufficient mechanisms to protect our citizens. Honorable Chairperson, as part of my accountability to this committee, I'm also obliged to advise the committee that, excuse me, that after receiving the second agreement from Johnson & Johnson, based on the same terms as the previous agreement and the additional precondition that had been discussed and agreed to between them and the department, we have unfortunately now received a formal email from J&J advising us that they would not sign off the 20 million doses until they get a letter from the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, which expresses support for the local investment that they've made in Aspen. We've been taken aback by this, as there are clauses in the agreement that express this support and acknowledge that this production will not just be limited to South Africa and the continent, but also targeted for the global markets. Honorable members are also aware that a few weeks ago, the President led a delegation to Aspen in Gqeberha. Our support for this production taking place in our own country was publicly made. Now, as it stands, we are of the view that the commitment has been expressed in full, as it's indicated in the agreement that we have signed. However, Johnson & Johnson has now told us that if we don't give them this letter, we're making their global leadership nervous, and to them, we have not shown our political will to support them. I mentioned this to the Honorable Chairperson to illustrate to Honorable members some of the difficult and sometimes unreasonable terms or preconditions that we've had to navigate through. I can also assure that you that we've not been sleeping on the job. The fact that we previously did not disclose to Parliament the blow-by-blow details of the intense negotiations was because we're prioritizing the closing of the agreements in order to secure the vaccines that we require for us to reach population immunity. So there have been a lot of negotiations that had to go on without us being able to discuss or divulge anything to the public whilst we're trying to get to make progress in the acquisition of our vaccines. Another classic illustration of these terms that we've had to deal with that were too risky was a precondition for the supply of vaccines that we received from Pfizer towards the end of our negotiations. This precondition stated that they wanted to have the sole discretion to determine additional terms and guarantees for us to fulfill indemnity obligations. This condition posed a potential risk to our assets and fiscus. We expressed our concern to them, so did Treasury as the department response for protecting the fiscus. The department responsible for protecting the fiscus. This led to further delays in concluding of the agreement and meant a delay in the delivery schedule we were negotiating at the time. After intense negotiations by our teams, Pfizer finally considered to removing this problematic term, and the final agreement signed does not contain this, and therefore we are relieved. And therefore, this obligation to have a determination at the sole discretion of the manufacturer does not bind South Africa. As government, we have found ourselves in a precarious position of having to choose between saving our citizens' lives and risking putting the country's assets into private companies' hands. And with all the above complexities of negotiating, I want to state up front that our firm commitment throughout as government has been that we do not neglect our constitutional obligation to protect lives and health of our people. In response to the question therefore asked about the different vaccines, the cost of the vaccines from Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson is $10 per dose. The cost of the AstraZeneca vaccine was $5.35 per dose. With regards to the AstraZeneca refund, I can confirm that in March already, we received a payment for the full AU 1 million doses which we sold to them. The amount paid was $5,250,000 US. This was the actual cost of the vaccines minus the freight. Last week, we were then refunded by the Serum Institute of India of the 500,000 doses that were not delivered in the amount of $2.675 million US. We're therefore happy that we have avoided what could have been viewed as a fruitless or wasteful expenditure. Honorable Chairperson, it is also important for me to also mention that the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer agreements have non-refundability clauses. The agreement specifically states that down payments that have been made in advance by the department shall not be refundable by the manufacturer to us in any circumstances. This is another onerous term that we have had to settle for, and to give members comfort, we did check with other jurisdictions if these terms had come through in the agreements, and it appears to be the case. We are aware, for example, that the agreements that have been signed with the African Union platform are similar to what we have signed, and in our consultations with the COVAX facility, we found out that a number of these onerous preconditions were also experienced by them. Honorable Chairperson, it gives me pleasure to also announce that we have received a formal acceptance and confirmation from Pfizer to increase their doses from 20 million to 30 million. This therefore means that we can now guarantee that the number of people that will be vaccinated with the Pfizer increased now from 10 million to 15 million. I'm also pleased that Pfizer has also given us a weekly delivery schedule for Q2. The current weekly delivery schedule for Q2 under the existing supply agreement is confirmed as follows. On the 3rd of May, we received 325,260 vaccines. The following week, on the 10th, we received the same amount, 325,260. The following week, the 17th, on the 5th of May 2021, we get the same amount, 325,260,000. On the 24th, we received the same amount, 325,260. Then on the 31st of May, that the amount is almost double. We will then get 636,480. The following week, 7th of June, 636,480. And 14th, another 636,480. 21st of June, we'll gain on the 28th of June, 636,000 for the Q2. We'll get an update for the following quarters. This means that from Pfizer, the total doses to be received in the month of May will be 1,937,500. Of June will be 2,547,090. Amasemple vaccines already paid for. The further 10 million doses committed this week will mean that these doses to be supplied. I'm very pleased that Pfizer committed to supply additional amounts on Q2 or Q3, and this is based on our plea to them that they need to increase these doses so that we can get as many South Africans vaccinated as quickly as possible before we experience the third wave as a country. So Pfizer has in response committed to giving us an additional 2 million in Q2 on top of what I've just mentioned above, starting in July. This will mean that Pfizer vaccines, and in Q3, we'll have a total of 16.5 million vaccines from Pfizer. Then in Q4, we'll receive the balance of 6.9 million vaccines. Honorable Chairperson, Johnson & Johnson has now formally confirmed that we will receive 1.1 million doses. I must also mention, honorable members, that the FDA and our subsequent announcement as a country to hold the Johnson & Johnson rollout calls for government to engage and make a determination jointly with Johnson & once we have a clear decision in the at large. As we are now, rather than an intention to completely withdraw the rollout. We remain confident that as government, and we are happy that almost 300,000 people have been vaccinated in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in South Africa. We have not received any of the reports of adverse events that have been caused by this vaccine, including that of clots.
Hello. There might be an issue with the minister's connection. We're struggling to hear him. And
Honorable Minister, for the past 3 minutes, I was thinking it is my connection here where I kept on losing you. We did not lose you completely, but there were times when you were reporting on this amount and this. Just go back maybe about 3 minutes of that. That is where I really was struggling, but I did not want to interfere because I didn't know whether it was me alone. Now I'm here from Honorable Kwahube, probably then let's do so. Thanks.
Chair, sorry, Chair. Maybe the minister
My apologies to
help.
Maybe the minister can do what, Honorable Jacobs?
Maybe switch off his video if it is a challenge to assist with us being able to hear him or for him to make his presentation.
Yeah, I see you, Honorable Jacob. You have your video off. Maybe this is an opportune moment to say, yes, we should switch our videos off if we are struggling, but there's been a request from Parliament that we make our videos on when we make our presentations or ask questions, and also including the minister when he's talking, because this meeting is going live on some national media. But Minister, if you can improve, then we will accept that you switch off for now. But let me leave it at that. Thanks.
Honorable Chairperson, let me check whether I am audible at this point. If not, I was going to request that I go through some of my colleagues' phones and then get through to the portfolio committee. If I can be heard, I can continue.
Fine for now. We are fine. We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I will proceed, but if I do get to cut, I will then use the telephone of one of my colleagues so that I can connect through. But let me just quickly go through the issues that you could have missed. The point I think that we were at was that at this point, it gives us pleasure to announce that we have received a formal acceptance and confirmation from Pfizer to increase their doses from 20 million to 30 million. Therefore, this gives us a guarantee that the number of people that we wanted to vaccinate will then move from 10 million to 15 million using the Pfizer vaccine. And they've given us a schedule for delivery. And this schedule means that for every week, beginning on the 3rd of May, we will receive 325,260 vaccines. That number will be received weekly until the 24th of May 2021. Starting from the 31st of May 2021, we'll receive 636,480 every week for the next 4 weeks until the 28th of June 2021. So this means that in May, we will then have received 1.937 million vaccines in May, and then 2.54 million vaccines by the end of June. This is based on the first 20 million that we have signed for with Pfizer. But for the further 10 million, Pfizer has indicated that they will be giving an additional 2 million doses in the first in May, and that this number will increase now to 8 million in the quarter 3, that is from July onwards. And then in the last quarter, by October, we'll get another 6.5 million. So this means that in quarter 2, by quarter 3, we'll have a total of 16.5 million vaccines from Pfizer, and then whereas in this quarter, it will go up to 6.5 million Pfizer vaccines. Now that's a huge boost for us, which is what we needed to get increased numbers earlier, because we needed to vaccinate as many people as possible before we even get the second wave, the third wave coming up on us. In terms of Johnson & Johnson, 1.1 million doses will be received next week, and that because of the announcement yesterday by FDA, we will be in touch with Johnson & Johnson to understand how the subsequent rollout is going to be. So we will be announcing that as soon as that is made available. We must also indicate that we are confident that 300,000 people that have been vaccinated already, they have not reported any of the side effects or adverse events that have caused the vaccines to be halted, and that includes the clotting disorders. Now, as we have said as well, that the numbers of the halting is a temporary arrangement, which is a precautionary measure. Today, Johnson & Johnson and various other players in the world to be able to get a guidance. We have also noticed that the report from Johnson & Johnson was that they would halt temporarily the vaccination program in Europe. So we are really trying to align with what is happening globally and take precautions for all our people to make sure our people are safe. Having said so, I'd like to then indicate that on the presentation, we have looked at a few areas of review, and amongst the issues that you will notice will be an indication that the major focus of our vaccination is going to take age as the major risk factor, where the comorbidities and seniority in age are a factor. And then, of course, coming from 40 years upwards are some of the factors that are important. And beyond that, we also have asked the provinces to give us their revised schedule. So there will be some provinces that will indicate that they might spill over to the early part of next year in the vaccination program. We will then say at this point that the numbers of vaccination sites. We'll share them in this list, and that, of course, we just need the members to be aware that we continue to refine this, because it's both public and private area sites, which we need to ultimately agree. That's where vaccination will be taking place. With that, Chairperson, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. I'd like the Director General to be given the opportunity to do the presentation, and then we'll then look at the questions of a clarification. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. We can now go straight to the DG, Dr. Buthelezi. Honorable members, I have already given you a list of your names and the list of how you'll be asking your questions. Please look at that and try and get to, when you get to that slot, open your video when you're asking the question. DG, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, honorable members, our Minister, Deputy Minister, colleagues, good morning. We will do a presentation that will cover the following topics. We'll deal with epidemiology and surveillance. We'll then spend more time on the update on the vaccine rollout, and we'll touch a bit on the establishment of the Northford compensation, which the Minister has covered very well. Some of the issues that will be in the presentation have been covered by the Minister, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on those slides. In terms of epidemiology and surveillance, basically what we are showing here is that the epidemic currently is at a plateau phase, and we are actually seeing infections that are going, our plateau phase is starting to go even below the plateau phase after the first wave. We're seeing the same with deaths and hospitalizations. So the black are the new cases, the gray shaded area are the hospitalizations, and the red are the deaths. So this is where we are for now. But also looking at the positivity rates and the number of tests that we are doing, we've seen that our positivity rate has really dropped. It's sitting between 3.8% and up to about 4.4, 4.5%. I mean, sometime early in January, we had positivity rates sitting at around 31 and 32%. That was at the peak of the second wave. So this is really what we call the low transmission levels of the epidemic currently. Then looking at the different provinces, the picture is the same, but would like to show the portfolio committee that we've had some cluster infections in the Northern Cape. That is the light green line, where we've got a bit of a spike earlier in March. These were the cluster infections in the Namakwa districts, mainly in the schools and some mines, and there were also some in the taverns. But our response teams managed to get in there and deal with those cases, did contact tracing, put people in quarantine, and now it has actually settled in that area. So this looks at number of new cases per 100,000 per day, and we're comparing from 15 March. We can see that the Northern Cape, that's where it was the only province that had more than 5 cases per 100,000 per day. And on the 22nd of March, this had increased to 8.1 cases per 100,000 per day. After the interventions by the 29th of March, this had decreased to 5.5 cases per 100,000 per day. And then on the 5th of April, this had gone down to 5.4 cases per 100,000 per day. So it's still the only province that is having more than 5 cases per 100,000 per day. All the other provinces are really at low transmission levels. This we're monitoring very closely so that we are able to pick up if there are areas that are starting to show some surges in the new infections. So similarly, if we look at the deaths, the recorded deaths, we can see that if we look at the red line, during the second wave, our deaths went much more higher as compared to the first wave. Similarly with the cases, which is the black line, but these have now gone down. We are still a bit worried. The deaths, normally they lag behind in terms of responding. So though they are decreasing, we will go through that in the next few slides, but they are still above the predicted deaths. We'll only start to settle when the red line is equal or is at least below that predicted deaths, which is the green line. So in summary, from our weekly analysis, as at the 11th of April 2021, there was a slight decrease in new cases there was a slight decrease of 0.58%. We compare the 7 days with the previous 7 days. So, for example, here we're comparing the week 29 March to 4 April with the week 5 to 11 April. And when we do the 14-day comparison, in the 14 days, the decrease was actually 7% in terms of the new cases. This is the best way of monitoring the infections, as looking at daily infections fluctuations is very unpredictable and cannot give you a true picture. It's better if you use the average in terms of the moving average. In terms of the mortality, the COVID-19 related deaths in the reporting period, which is 5 to 11 April, declined by 3.4% as compared to the previous week. However, the 14-day comparison showed a decline of 50.7% compared to the preceding 14 days. Cumulative case fatality ratio is 3.42%, with the 4 provinces, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and Western Cape, contributing 82% to all reported COVID-19 deaths. In terms of hospitalizations, based on DATCOV hospital surveillance system, we had a decline of 33.8% patients if we compare those weeks in terms of the people that were admitted. And as of the 11th of April, we had 3,614 patients admitted across the country, of which 17% were in ICU, and of those, 52% were on ventilation. In terms of healthcare worker infections, there were 14 healthcare workers who tested positive in the reporting period. There was no death recorded amongst the healthcare workers in the reporting period. And then cumulatively, we've had 55,439 healthcare workers that tested positive, and of which 14% required admission, and 85% of those were discharged, and 84 are currently admitted as at the 11th. Healthcare workers, they constitute 3.5% of all 3.5% of all cases of COVID-19 reported in the country, and cumulatively we've lost 852 healthcare workers since the first case of death from COVID-19 was reported, which is a case fatality ratio of 1.53%. Through you, Honorable Chair, I will then move on to the vaccine rollout update. And here, just as a reminder that we do have governance structures that are overseeing this work. And at the Apex, we've got the Interministerial Committee on Vaccines, which meets every week, and it's chaired by the Deputy President of the Republic. And the function is to give overall political oversight. And then we have our Ministerial Advisory Committee on Vaccines, which is really responsible for giving us scientific guidance to ensure that we apply the best principles of science as we move forward. And then we do have a Ministerial Advisory Committee on Social and Behavior Change, reporting to both the Minister of Health and the Minister of Social Development, whose function is mainly to work on social and community mobilization around COVID, around the vaccine, and around all the work that needs to be done with the communities. Then we've got the National Vaccine Coordinating Committee, which is responsible for national coordination. We have then recently formed a joint working group with a business, which is really doing day-to-day granular planning and ensuring that we are working hand in hand in terms of identifying how we should be moving in different areas of the rollout plan. This day-to-day granular planning committee, it has 5 work streams, both with members from government and members from business. And then it meets really every second day, but then it reports to the Strategic Oversight Committee, co-chaired by the DG of Health and DG of Treasury, with senior leaders from government who participate, and meets Monday and Friday, and mainly just to look we've developed a critical path with key milestones that we monitor twice a week to see if we are actually reaching those milestones as we move forward. So just as a reminder again, Honorable Chair, what are the overall aims and objectives and key principles of the vaccine rollout? We've got two objectives. Firstly, we want to address, excuse me, we want to address mortality and morbidity. That is, we want to ensure that we deal with those people who are more vulnerable to get severe disease and die. At the same time, we also have a second objective to get as many people as possible to get vaccinated so that we reach herd immunity. At the end of the day, these coming together, we're able to ensure that there's community and workplace survival. We prevent lockdowns and other social and economic disruptions. The society, education, and economy can open up and resume full capacity. Hence, we're doing then the age-based sequencing to ensure that we actually get the people who are more at risk being addressed first, which we'll go through as we move on. Then the key principles, we need to have a very clear program that does not confuse the people. We need to move with speed because we want to vaccinate as many people as possible. And then it needs to be fair. We need to ensure that the quality is not compromised, and it should be as simple as possible so that when people get in, they should be able to get in and out at the most reasonable time whilst getting quality service that is fair and they understand exactly what is happening. Now, who are we vaccinating? Who goes first and when? How much vaccine do we have? Allocation of targets, when will we distribute these vaccines? This has already been covered by the Minister. So as put in here, I'm not going to waste. The Minister did this very well. But one issue that we just want to add is that because of the difficulty of some of the logistics with the Pfizer vaccine, including the cold chain management, the kind of packages that it needs, it actually forces you, once you've taken it out of a particular temperature, that you need to use it within a particular time. So we need, we really need to ensure that it works in the sites that have good capacity, and mostly in the metros, in the larger towns, and then we then use the J&J predominantly in the periphery where you don't have to meet all the onerous requirements that you need to meet. Of course, with all that is happening, this is an ongoing discussion as we move forward with what has happened in the last 24 to 48 hours. And then who are we vaccinating? Phase 1 is for healthcare workers, and our initial plan is still, we started on the 17th of February, and it's a 3-month program that we think it should end by the 17th of May. But now with the disturbance, we will be watching the situation with the disturbance in the J&J. We'll be watching the situation and updating the portfolio committee if there needs to be adjustments on these dates if needs be. And then here we're looking at all healthcare workers in the public, the private sector, and all categories, be it the security, be it the cleaners, be it the ward orderlies, be it the doctors. We're just putting everyone together on this one. We currently have about 800,000 registered on the electronic vaccination data system. And then for phase 2, we're really targeting here essential workers, persons in congregate settings, people over 60, and people who are more than 18 but have co-existing morbidities. With the general population, we will really be targeting for the when we start the over 60, and I will spend a bit of time on this because of their vulnerability. But for all essential workers, our target will be to do 40 years as above as we start, then move down. And with this approach, especially with the essential workers, we know that we'll also be hitting some of the comorbidities, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, because most of the comorbidities start at that age and going up. And then with the persons over 60, we mentioned that from May, we'll start with the over 60, then move to the over 40 and down the age band. It will be a logistical nightmare, but because of the epi data that we have, we're trying to ensure that we get as many elderly people as possible before the winter season comes in. And then, of course, then we're targeting about 16.6 million, and this phase we've given it 6 months. And then the remaining population, then we're targeting around just above 22 million, and we're giving it 3 months. And obviously, we hope that whatever happens, there is not much disturbance in terms of the timings that we've put in place. Then again, just to touch on in terms of the essential workers, this list is not exhaustive, but this is where we'll be looking at the police, the army, the traffic officers, correctional officers, teachers, early childhood development centers, social workers, municipal workers, community-based workers, home affairs, SASA officials, faith leaders, traditional leaders, all these people. These are just mainly linked to government, but those also in the private sector. We are working closely with NETLEC, and these are the sectors, and they've given us the numbers. And we are looking at agriculture, be it formal agriculture, be it the agro-processing plants, and any value chain that's linked to agriculture, they fall in there. The mining is very clear, manufacturing, be it clothing, be it steel, or any related manufacturing sector. Again, at NETLEC, this is well managed through our work stream that's working with them. And then the people in the utilities, that's people working in the water sector, gas industry, electricity, and the related industries. The construction industry, then the trade industry, and here that's where we're looking at your retail, wholesale retail, the retail shops, the hotels, the restaurants, the spazas, the shippings. All these people, they fall under this portfolio. Then the transport sector, we're looking at the airlines, the rail, the taxis, the truck drivers, the bus drivers, the people that work in the taxi ranks, everyone that has got to do with transport falls under this. Then the finance industry, looking at the banks, the insurances, the barrier clubs, the stokvels, community and social services, private households, people working in the private households. Those are all the sectors. And again, this is work that is driven through the work stream that is working with NETLEC to ensure that we are able to reach these people. This is very important as we come to our OHS work stream to see how many of these can be reached through their occupational health services in vaccination. And then just again, back to the issue of age, this just work that was done by Andrew Bull and the team in the Western Cape. Basically, why are we prioritizing age? Age is the single most predictor for morbidity and mortality. And when we use what we call the hazard ratio, the age bands above 80, followed by those 70 to 79, and those 60 to 69 are most at risk of getting getting very severe COVID and needing admissions, but also they are the ones most at risk to die from COVID. They are even more at risk compared to those with comorbid medical conditions like diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, hypertension, HIV, and asthma. Hence, the age scientifically makes sense that we need to prioritize those people if we are to have a dent on hospital admissions and also premature mortality. Then the steps in the client journey, we'll be using the electronic vaccination data system, where we expect all the South Africans to enroll through this system. There's a lot of work going on in terms of this. We hope the system is going to go live this Friday, and there'll then be announcements for people to start registering. We are aware of the fact that some people, the elderly in the rural areas, might have a problem with this. We have had our meeting with the provinces, and the provinces will actually be having some campaigns using the community health workers who will go around with the tablets and also with some of the donated cell phones that we have to register the elderly so that they do not suffer. I must also mention that it should not be a barrier. If someone is not registered and gets to the center, there will be assisted enrollment. There will be computers in each of the sites, and people will be registered. It might take a bit longer when they are there, but it will also be difficult. We want to try and avoid to have as many people because we don't want to clog the sites. But the system can then do the scheduling using an SMS, giving someone a date, a time slot, and it can also allocate a person. As Sandy Lebutedes registers and puts his address at Umlala's Eshowe, it will then allocate him to Eshowe Hospital, but it will be based on proximity, which we'll talk about that. So when then a person has been registered and has been called in, the person will get in. They will have COVID screening. They'll be verified, they get vaccinated, they then get observed for immediate adverse events, and then when they are fine, they then have to go and be given a second date if they are a Pfizer. The system will also then give the reminders for the return date for that particular person. When we redistribute the vaccines, this in terms of the 2 vaccines as mentioned by the Minister, we have the Pfizer, which will come from abroad, and it will take about 9 days for that vaccine to be in the arm of a person. We still need to go through the process of quality control with the National Control Lab in Bloemfontein, whilst the stock is quarantined, and then we do what we call the batch release when we get the results, and then we're then able to then get it to the different sites. This is working on the worst case scenario. We are in negotiations with the National Control Lab to see if this can be shortened so that we don't really have a long time with the vaccine being here and people not getting vaccinated. Then on the Aspen produced J&J vaccine, we've put in, well, the dates we've put in there, those are just dates so as to, they are illustrative dates. And we have said that if the vaccine arrives on the 24th, for them, the time is going to be shorter. Why shorter? It's because the process of quality control by the laboratory has already been done. Actually, the samples left last week from Aspen to the National Control Lab, then which gives us a bit of dates, cutting down the waiting period. So it will take about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. We factored in a holiday on this one. Then by the 28th of April, then we should have the first person getting a jab on their deltoid mass. Where will we vaccinate? Who vaccinates which population? Where will we vaccinate? The types of sites. How will we manage reimbursement? How will we allocate clients to sites and schedule payments? Again, we've got 3 streams that we'll be working on. We're having the general population that will be linked to vaccination sites through the scheduling by the EVDS system using mainly the proximity. And again, we'll start with those that are over 60 years of age, and then then moving down as mentioned. Then the second stream is the industry facilitated vaccination sites. That's where we spoke about work that we're doing with the private sector. For example, the mining industry will be doing their own vaccination within their hospitals and within their centers. The other industry that just approached us now is the road freight industry, where they actually want to use their truck stop wellness clinics that they have throughout the country to vaccinate some of the truckers. So it's all work that we welcome when we work on these issues. And then also including government departments. Most of them have got wellness clinics in the public sector. So again, this will be done there. In the municipalities, again, most municipal clinics, linking the municipal staff through their wellness centers and their clinics. So these are all industry or workplace occupational health services that we will use. And then we have institutions of care. Here we're looking at people at congregate settings, mainly the old age homes, the correctional centers and the other areas, which will be very easy to manage because these are people that are a captive audience to get to and just vaccinate and get done with them. But it will also be easier even to register these people on the EVDS because they are again a captive audience. Then how have we put in the portfolio of sites? We've put in the sites as small sites, medium and mass vaccination sites. And we've put in terms of the throughput per day, what we mean by small, medium, large, and the mass vaccination sites. And in terms of the capacity that we've put together, we believe that working together with the private sector, we are able with the capacity that is there to do at least 250,000 to 300,000 vaccinations per day. This is one of the granular works that we are busy with, and it is very, very doable. And then in terms of the sites, as mentioned by the Minister, these are the sites, public and private per province, and the current vaccinators that are there. And then we've also, it's the same slide, but now we've changed it to show small, medium, large, and extra large sites. It's still work in progress because we're still finalizing our mass vaccination sites. We hope by this Friday in our meeting with business, who will be putting quite some money in setting up these mass vaccination sites, we will be synthesizing our mass vaccination sites as we move forward. These sites won't be activated at the same time. They will be activated in an incremental manner. But as we move deeper into phase 2, we should be getting as many of them as possible functional and moving into phase 3 as well. Then this then is a much more detail where we've shown how many sites, public and private, per each local municipality in the country. I'm not going to go through this. It's a number of slides, but we've gone through each of the local municipalities to show how many sites are there and how many per province. So these are the slides that are there. And with your indulgence, Chair, I don't really want to get deep into this. It's been circulated. And then
move.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Then and then in terms of the different populations, insured and uninsured, what is the process? National Treasury has allocated some money as to be able to take care of the uninsured population that is going to be scheduled to be vaccinated within the private sites. They are working on. We have our weekly meetings with them, and we're working hard to sort out the mechanism. They will be working on gazetting the tariff and the other issues. So there's a general population, and the public providers and the private providers will play an important role. Our principle here is universal coverage. The vaccine should be free at the point of care. And for the general population that's insured, most of them will be covered through their medical schemes. That's just between 7 and 8 million people, and they'll mostly use the private providers. And then we also have the uninsured workers in industries who will be taken care of by their particular industries. For example, the mining sector will be they've advised us that they've even put up a particular insurance just to take care of those miners that are not insured. That means they don't have medical schemes. And then, as mentioned, it's universal coverage. The access will be based on proximity, closest to the service point, be it public or private. And the EVDS has got a functionality, as mentioned, to actually allocate people to the sites as they register. So it's very important that when someone registers, they actually put their correct address where they are, so that the system will be able to allocate them to the site. Again, our hospitals, mainly district hospitals, will remain the main hubs of the vaccination. Of course, again, we will be doing the phase B, 1B, where we'll vaccinate the remaining healthcare workers. They'll be focusing on that, but also there will be the hubs in terms of the hub and spoke outreach, where they'll be able to reach out to the smaller sites with the mobile vehicles to vaccinate in those areas that are outside of that. So we want to ensure that each district hospitals are covering at least one sub-district, so that we have a very fair and equitable geographical spread, and then we'll then gradually expand the number of sites in an incremental manner, as mentioned earlier on. Then these are the vaccinations as at yesterday at 18:30. We're done 291,244 vaccinations as at 6:30 yesterday evening. Of course, with the 4 provinces vaccinating more, which in a way is in keeping with the distribution of healthcare workers in the country. And then the minister has spoken about the difficult clauses. The 3 agreements that we've had to get into was with Johnson & Johnson, the Pfizer, and the Serum Institute. And then the agreements, as Minister has mentioned, they contain broad and far-reaching clauses which require government and department to do a number of issues. One is the indemnification of the manufacturers against any claims. the establishment of a no-fault compensation scheme, and then they've put in a very onerous confidentiality obligations, as mentioned by the minister, and also provisions that indicate that there is no refund, and the minister has spoken to this. But the agreements also protect the manufacturers for any delay in delivery, such as there is no penalty or consequence for any delays in the delivering of vaccines. And there is also no liability for any failure to deliver doses, even where such delay or failure is due to gross negligence or willful misconduct on their part. The minister has covered this very well. Then, obviously, as mentioned, with our legal team, we had quite very extensive negotiations where the minister himself was sometimes involved. We've had meetings up to midnight with some of these manufacturers. Then some of the clauses that were difficult, for example, they finally managed to remove them in the agreements. For example, there was one that wanted the requirement that wanted the purchaser to provide guarantees, obligations and protections and indemnities as determined at the sole discretion of the manufacturer, and the sufficiency of such statutory or regulatory requirements of funding appropriation shall be in the manufacturer's sole discretion. I mean, this really borders on really undermining the fiscal sovereignty of the country, as mentioned by the minister. But our team, legal team, were able to get this out of the contracts, and we moved forward with them. Then, lastly, on the no-fault compensation, the minister has covered this very well, and basically we'll just have one or two slides to say whilst this was a condition precedent that has been set by the vaccine manufacturers, but we see it as a country that it might be a good thing in future as we move forward to consider on how we manage our medical negligence claims in terms of compensation as one of the big problems that we have. Then the elements of the scheme is eligibility, the process and decision making, the standard of proof, elements of compensation, the litigation rights, administration, and the funding. And the key committees that will be there, one is what we call the NISA committee, whose main responsibility will be to establish the causal link between the vaccine and the injury. So there's an injury, the duty of this committee. It is, by the way, an existing committee already in the department. It will then prove that the injury or the adverse event is indeed due to the vaccine. That's a causal link. And once they've done that, they've done their work, and then it should then go to the adjudication panel, which will really be responsible for defining the injury and determining the compensation. That's a quantum of the compensation, which of course, when we develop the directions, we will be working on some quantums using some best practices, of course, with some inputs from the actuaries. And then once that committee has decided that Sandile lost hearing, and yes, it was due to the vaccine, then and they say he must be paid 5,000 rand, then there's adjudication panel work. And Sandile, if he's happy with that 5,000 rand, it goes straight to compensation, which should then be paid through the administration part of the scheme. And then if Sandile is unhappy with the 5,000, he wants 1 million, he then has a right to appeal. Then it then goes to an independent appeals panel, which is really responsible for reviewing the decision of the adjudication panel. And if Sandile is still unhappy with this, it is at that time then he can then consider going through the civil litigation route. But of course, it's important that the people must exhaust all the systems within the scheme before they can go out into, into the civil courts. And then, of course, we'll have then the overarching governance committee, which will be overseeing the functioning of the scheme and providing advice to the minister. And this committee will be chaired by a retired judge, and the minister has briefed the committee on this area. So the current status, as mentioned, the amendments to the disaster management regulations to the fund have been drafted, and they will be published for public comment for 5 days. And then, as the minister mentioned, the process of appointing a judge is really at a very advanced stage. Thank you very much, Chair, honorable members, Minister, Deputy Minister, and colleagues. We submit as a department.
Yes, Honorable Minister, I think you may come at the end. Now, I'd like to take the members' questions. Thank you very much. This process, one may think is a simple process, is now needing lawyers, it needs judges, it needs all sorts of expertise, but we are glad that we are on top of it. Honorable members, I forwarded you a list where I'm requesting that you actually put your video, if you can, while you are asking questions. May I, through your permission, Honorable Members, which I know you will grant me, allow me to read the questions of Mama Shlengwa, who is struggling wherever she is. Then after that, it will be Honorable Imam Sheikh, followed by Honorable Ismail. Third one, Honorable Kwahube. Fourth, Honorable Dr. Jacobs. Number 5, Honorable Kela. Number 6, Honorable Sukers. Number 7, Honorable Dr. Tembegwa. And number 8, Dr. Honorable Ms. Chirwa. With your permission, Honorable members, let me start by reading the question of Mama Shengwa. This is what she's saying to you, Minister, regarding the decision to suspend the vaccination rollout. When did the minister become aware of this possible risk associated with the J&J vaccine? Number 2, why was there so little vaccination over the past weekend? Was this linked maybe to this announcement? And what measures will the government take to ensure that those healthcare workers who have had the vaccine are monitored closely and given priority of treatment? The last one is, what is the government's plan to ensure that the safety of healthcare workers going forth in terms of being vaccinated? Those were questions from Mama Shengwa. Then I will then allow Honorable Imam Sheikh to start, and all other members who have got their numbers now will follow suit until the last Honorable Ms. Chirwa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think Honorable Van Staden also sent you a question.
I read the questions of Honorable Van Staden as part of my,
Okay.
I don't know, maybe you missed that. He was actually asking about, due to the temporary suspension of the J&J by FDA and the announcement made by the minister last night, will this have an impact on the vaccine rollout? The time that the minister is going to, how long will the minister wait for the scientists to come back to him? Those ones are incorporated in my mind. Thank you for disturbing me, because now you are giving me a chance to read another member who's struggling, Honorable Munyai. Honorable Munyai struggling where he is. He has sent me a question. I have one question. My question is, how much is allocated by National Treasury for vaccine administration? So he wants the minister to go and check on the budget speech of the minister and come again and indicate. But this is a question from Honorable Nai. How much is allocated by National Treasury for vaccine administration? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for that clarity. Yeah, let me just start off on the issue of the Johnson & Johnson. I think my colleagues have to some extent covered the impact that we are concerned about. What are the financial implications on the suspension of Johnson & Johnson, and if we are for any reason not going to use it in the future, over and above the large quantities of vaccines that have been ordered from them? Clearly that will have an impact if we're not going to proceed with that. But I'm concerned about the fact that it would appear that these pharmaceutical companies are laughing all the way to the bank, because they put us in a very difficult situation, particularly when on the issue of no-fault compensation, over and above the fact that they are saying no refunds and things. So if you cancel, so what is going to happen here if we had to cancel Johnson & Johnson based on the challenges we're facing or the risks attached to that? Now, the other thing is this, and through you, Chairperson, to the Minister, why is it we don't act timeously when we establish worldwide that there are problems, why do we wait till the 11th hour before we take action, like in this case with Johnson & Johnson, and continued rolling it out and putting our healthcare workers at great risk? And remember, our healthcare workers were given very little or no options. You take it. If you don't want to take it, you're not forced to take it, but you will not be protected as the healthcare workers if you get the virus. So it was actually a no-win situation. Now I'm very concerned about Johnson & Johnson, particularly through you, Chairperson, Minister, based on the fact that they have been found wanting in terms of these, together with Aspen Pharmaceutical and these McKenzie's, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that had to be paid. And I'm very worried about this particular institution and what impact it is having. How are they controlling the prices when it comes to this kind of thing? And remember that they were manufacturing drugs that put hundreds of thousands of people at risk worldwide, which is what they were found guilty of in any case. Now, the other thing is that the Pfizer vaccines also appears to have some challenges in some countries, like the Johnson & Johnson. And we are relying particularly on these two institutions. And I'm concerned about what is going to happen going forward should we establish that even there we have a problem. Then the other thing is this, that I want to touch on is the issue of the Ivermectin. Now, Minister, it's shocking but a disgrace that SAHPRA has now allowed it with no further evidence after hundreds of people may have died and been infected in South Africa, if not thousands. Now, who is going to be liable, Minister? I know your chief of staff arrogantly wrote to me and said he'll hold me with punitive costs for wanting to pursue this matter. Who is going to pay this millions of rands in cost? Should it not be the CEO herself? Should be paying this cost as punitive cost for having taken the decision that you take single-handedly without intervention from the people, and it might have cost a lot of lives in South Africa. Now, my question is, where does SAHPRA fit in all these things, Minister? Because you've continued, you procured it, and rightfully so, because you were in a hurry to want to get these vaccines, and we can't blame you and the department if something goes wrong with the vaccines, because we all needed to be in line to achieve and get these vaccines. However, SAHPRA allowed you to procure these things without any approvals. But when it came to the issue of Ivermectin, no, there's not enough evidence. There was not enough evidence, and there's evidence right now, even in the Johnson & Johnson, Minister, that there are challenges we're experiencing there. So is it a toothless body? Should we shut it down? Or should we call for them all to resign, particularly the CEO who is conflicted with McKenzie, Johnson & Johnson, all these people? So that is my other issue in terms of that, and who is going to be paying, and what are you as the department going to do as a result of their conduct, which is now costing millions of taxpayers' money? Can you also tell me what is the latest in terms of the SIU investigation into that activities at SAHPRA with the corruption and the maladministration? Is there anything latest in terms of that? And I know I asked the last time about the issue of McKenzie, whether they paid their fine. You can see they all over ESCOM, corruption, it's Zondo Commission, and their link. Is there, Minister, any link with what you've procured through Aspen and Johnson & Johnson, with any link with McKenzie at all? I'd like to know, because they appear to be in the forefront when it comes to these things. I think for now, I will stop the chair and come back if necessary later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you to the Minister and his team. I have just 4 questions to the Minister and the team. Minister, I think there's been, you know, I know certainly if on my side there's been many confusion. There's been plenty of confusion around terms like, you know, we've procured doses of the vaccine, or we've secured doses here with this manufacturer. We've reached now an agreement with this manufacturer, and you know, these have often been made to be milestones worth celebrating. Now, just for the clarity for us and obviously the people at home, what is the difference between these two? Because ultimately, as we stand now, there's been less than 300,000 healthcare workers who've been vaccinated. And yet there are millions, you talk about over 40 million people can be vaccinated due to what has been secured. So what is actually the difference between when you secure something and then now when you are in a position to be able to receive the vaccine and roll it out? And it's linking this to my second question. So it's more about clarity, Minister, that, once an agreement has been signed, is then the next step simply delivery? And if the next step is delivery, is then the next step roll out? And ultimately also what I would like to understand is, I see there's a truncated delivery with Pfizer in particular, because you talk about how in May there'll be different tranches of the vaccine rollout from 300K, Again, I just would like to understand, is it because of our own storage capacity that we're only getting various sort of doses that are limited? Then this is linked to the clarity around that I'm seeking about vaccine rollout to our healthcare workers. We always understood, Minister, that this was going to be, we didn't always understand, but we are now on the same page that the Sisonke trial is a trial phase, but it was always meant to at least target about 500. First, the initial target was 1.2 million healthcare workers, and then that was readjusted to about 500,000 healthcare workers. As things stand, we are sitting at less than 300,000 healthcare workers who have been vaccinated. Why is this being so criminally slow? It makes no sense, because ultimately what I cannot understand is that why days go by where no healthcare worker is being vaccinated. Over Easter weekend, not a single South African was vaccinated. The past couple of days, these are marginal numbers. Why is this happening? Then my second last question is relating to the announcement that you made yesterday around the FDA decision to halt the J&J rollout. And of course, the United States is in a very different position than we are, because they have various vaccines in circulation, whereas we don't. So when we halt the J&J rollout, we don't have anything else until Pfizer arrives. So what I want to understand, and again, I'm happy to be guided here, is that, statistical significance is a thing. And so was the decision made entirely on the basis that 6 people out of 6 million jabs had adverse effects? Is that a significant enough number for us to halt the rollout of the vaccine? And so that's what I would like to understand, because it seems to me that the 6 out of 6 million is a very marginal figure. And so on what basis was this decision then made? And then lastly, you've said that J&J is requiring a letter from DTI, a letter of support. This is, I'm not understanding what the purpose of this DTI letter of support is. When will DTI be able to sign this? Because of course we can't have any further delays. And what must this letter particularly say that needs to come from DTI? Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, everyone. And once again, thank you for the presentation. I just have a few questions. I'm sorry I can't put on my video. I've got a very bad network connection on the site. It's Honorable Hasina Ismail. My first question, has there been any vaccine trials for the Pfizer vaccines? If there were, when can we expect trial results on Pfizer in the South African case? What were the results for the South African variant with regard to Pfizer? Was this trial conducted in South Africa? And what adverse side effects have been identified thus far in the South African context? We're expecting Pfizer, but there's been no talk on its trials, Minister, and this is a bit worrisome. Therefore, I'm asking a question. My second question is based on the J&J vaccine, and with regard to the social media reports on blood clotting, etc. Now, when did government first know about the blood clots? When did government first really realize that, this is what's going on? And I just also want to clarify the question, is this why, vaccinations had slowed down in South Africa? What adverse effects have been identified thus far in the South African context when it comes to the J&J vaccine or trials? My third question with regard to the no-fault compensation fund. You know, I've asked questions at the previous meeting and I didn't receive all my responses. So I'm actually very happy that the chairperson wrote that letter to you, Minister. But I have further up questions to say is that what measures will be put in place now to ensure that the management of this fund is actually transparent? And what measures will be put in place to prevent the fund from theft, fraud, and corruption going forward? My fourth question, Minister, is that I'm just actually very concerned with the recent reports of blood clotting, etc. We have paid for these vaccines already, and you've explained that there's a clause there of no refunds. Since we don't know of Pfizer trials and, you know, with a South African variant, are we sure that we're actually doing the right thing of paying for vaccines that trials were not done in South Africa? As stated in my first question, unless there were trials of Pfizer being done in South Africa that we don't know about, please clarify for us. My fourth question, please provide a detailed distribution plan on how and which vaccines will be distributed to the various provinces and what factors will influence these decisions. I know the DG and the Minister explained that you're waiting for the provinces to give you, to send you their needs, but I'm saying, how are you going to decide whether the J&J vaccine is going to go to Gauteng province or the Pfizer vaccine is going to go to Western Cape? I just want to know what is the deciding factors on that. And my last question, Minister, you have specified that we are receiving vaccines every week. So since the Pfizer vaccines need special requirements for storage, how is the department going to ensure that the necessary amount of vaccinations will actually be taking place? We already know, as my honorable colleague has just specified, vaccinations in this country is going very slow. So now we've already procured, we've already paid, and you've specified, the DG has specified the delivery and so forth. I'm just worried that on the ground, will vaccinations be done on time? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and the DG, for the presentations. Now we note that everything is very fluid and dynamic, and there are many changes on a daily basis. I think we must also express an appreciation for the fact that you're able to change on a daily basis and improve things and the terms and the negotiations as these are changed for the betterment of the people of South Africa. So I want to just put our appreciation for the capacity of the department to adapt to the changing circumstances. But also in terms of the intensity and the difficulties of the negotiations, we've heard from you that there are great challenges and it's very intense, and that you've been able to bridge a number of those negotiations in terms of finding suitable terms and suitable agreements with the manufacturers. So we understand that these terms are put there by the manufacturers, and it's your job to make certain that all South Africans get the best deal out of this. So we also appreciate that from yourselves. But we also note the non-refundable clauses in the agreements, and we've also heard from Honorable Sheikh Imam having a problem with that, and also Honorable Ismail, in the sense that questions are of course raised as to what happens to money which have been paid, and should the vaccine create challenges, for example, the one on J&J now with the blood clots, what happens to the money actually that has been spent? And also, if maybe the Minister can give us more indications and more understanding of these non-refundable clauses within the agreements. And then also, the challenges, just to mention again, must not be underestimated, that these must be huge challenges, and we must express that to ourselves and to the public that yes, I guess it must be very difficult challenges. We're also happy to receive indications of the procurement agreements of larger amounts of the vaccine in the second, third, and fourth quarters, and also the time frame of receipt of the vaccines. We also have taken note of the disclosure of the cost of the vaccines per dose, as has been put by the Minister earlier, and also on the no-fault compensation fund. And you can see what I am doing is I'm saying a lot of work, good work has been done, and that we should really not negate that by not giving honor where it should be given, and giving recognition where it should be given for the work that has gone into this. So one of those is the No-Fault Compensation Fund. We are pleased to see a plan which will be implementable, and that there's also some expediency appropriated to this plan, and we appreciate that, and also the appointment of Judge Sandile Ngobo as the chairperson of the governance committee, as one of the committees of the No-Fault Compensation Fund. And we look forward to the publishing of the regulations, Minister, for establishment of the fund, which you said would be done in the next 5 days. Can you also give us an indication then of the funding of this fund? Where would the funds come from for this fund to be established? And at some stage, if not today, give us an indication as to the monitoring of the money of the fund once it is established. And then lastly, on the confusion created by various groups, including the Western Cape government on the procurement of vaccines, acquisition and procurement, there just seems to be an ongoing discussion. But maybe you can just come in here, excuse me, and just maybe reaffirm the position on the acquisition and procurement of the vaccines at the national government level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me also welcome the report from the Minister and also the presentation from the head of the department. We really appreciate the good work that we are doing, and also coming to us as a portfolio committee and brief us about everything that is happening regarding the vaccine rollout in our country. And so far, we know that about more than 250 care workers have been vaccinated, and we are looking forward to make sure that at least by mid-May, we meet the target of vaccinating all the health workers, and also starting the new second phase of rollout. And we do have a confidence, Minister, that is going to happen despite the challenges that are coming forth, but I know that they will be resolved. Coming to the issues that I want to raise, Minister, in terms of the presentations and also your input, the vaccine rollout plan being clear in terms of vaccine procurement, agreement in place with manufacturers, distribution of vaccine per province, guideline for provinces, vaccination sites identified, which we are very happy as a portfolio so far. And really, I must say, as a witness, that on Thursday, I saw that you were around Gauteng checking the readiness and also the vaccination site in Gauteng, which is a good sign. And also, we really appreciate the good work that we are doing throughout the country of checking the readiness and also making sure that all our sites are ready for implementation of the vaccine. Coming to the issue that I want to raise, the first question that I want to raise, who is responsible for preparation of the vaccine sites? How will control over, for example, the integrity of vaccines being ensured? Those are the questions that I want to ask from the presentation that was presented to us. But also other questions are being covered by Dr. Kenny, and we really appreciate the good work that the department is doing, and also the minister being at the forefront at all the time. Thank you very much.
Honorable Supers.
Thank you, Chairperson. I want to thank the department for and the Minister for the presentation. I am certain for all our colleagues, things are becoming much more clearer. I have a few questions, and I will stick to the questions for my own sake here, because I think a lot of us here are in dismay with the terms that are being demanded. And it seems, I think it proves a point that politicians and business, it is a difficult combination. Minister, I want to ask the following questions. In reviewing the plan, I see little provision for contingencies. Just yesterday, the FDA and CDC halted the use of the J&J vaccine. And a small study from Israel suggests that Pfizer is not as effective against B1351. Further disruptions are very likely. And when I look at the slide on the Joint Strategic Oversight Committee, I see a very small team working on supply. Yet strategic sourcing and procurement has been the area in which we have failed. Thus my comment in the beginning here. How will the minister work to strengthen the strategic sourcing capacity? And how can he be assisted to do this? And I think it comes back to the questions that was asked previously by my colleagues. And I think we need to, the minister and the department needs to really now make use of the collective parliament that is here to say, how do we assist government to increase capacity? Because I do think that that is one of the key failures, that is the fragmented approach, the failure for us to communicate or for the department to effectively communicate with Parliament and put all cards on deck in order for us to really unify around solutions. Secondly, Section 32 of the Bill of Rights states that everyone has the right of access to any information held by the state. As members of Parliament, we are the representatives of the people. It is completely unacceptable that we do not receive the information that we need to conduct oversight and to hold the executive accountable. We cannot run away from our constitution by simply saying strict non-disclosure agreements. This is contracting out of our constitution, which is completely unacceptable. It is not enough to say that big business is dictating the terms to others. What steps is the minister taking to ensure that our people's constitutional rights are protected? And I do note, Minister, that you have mentioned the protection of the rights of South Africans in your opening. Number 3, vaccine refusal and hesitancy is increasing because of incorrect information from the conspiracy theories, consultation being limited to groups the government is comfortable with, and lack of education. We cannot think that we can order our people around and tell them what they must think and what is good for them. We need to engage all our people as key stakeholders, not just those that are in the structures government normally engages with. For example, government has failed to engage with religious leaders from the newer Pentecostal and charismatic churches. How are you going to ensure wide involvement, not just with this group, but with all groups that are not within existing structures? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. My questions are as follows. The first one, how many Chinese or Russian vaccine companies to date have you engaged on possible supply of vaccines? Question 2, the rollout phases as it has been presented to us today versus the available vaccines, and specifically with regard to J&J halt. At the same time, anticipating the possible adverse reactions that might be experienced by the healthcare workers in South Africa. What is your contingency plan should that happen? How do you ensure that the healthcare providers community is aware of the potential for those adverse events? And how do you plan for proper recognition and management due to the unique treatment required with this type of blood clot? In Gauteng recently, there has been a warning of rising COVID-19 infections in specifically Sedibeng, Johannesburg, Tshwane, and Ekurhuleni. How do you approach this type of occurrence to prevent the further spread thereof? Minister, the South African-born bioscientist who is behind the development of a new game-changer pill to prevent COVID-19. The vaccine, which is being tested in the form of that pill, is, according to the BioVac CEO, Morena Makwasana, will not have to be stored at the low temperatures like the injectable vaccines. Have you considered having negotiations with this company? And if not, why? And if you are considering to do that, how speedily can you be able to accommodate this company? Mention was made that the provinces, you are expecting revised schedules from provinces. But this is confusing because this province schedule of vaccination depends entirely on the schedule and availability of vaccines from the department itself. So how are you going to make sure that there's less confusion and uncertainty regarding this aspect? When the DDG was presenting, he said the Treasury has provided them with some money. My question is, we don't talk of some money. We want to know what is the amount of money that has been provided by the Treasury and who controls the usage and how is it going to be used. And as usual, I would like to make use of this opportunity just to ask for feedback or any other information, because I usually don't get direct feedback from the people from the department about the questions that I usually post outside the COVID-19. And the first one is about the Eastern Cape healthcare workers whose contract were supposed to end on the 31st of March. And even though they said it's going to be extended, but I heard the report that it's only extended for 3 months. Why can't they do the same with KZN and extend the contract to 12 months? The last one is the feedback on the internship who are not receiving any stipend in Gauteng province hospitals, while the others are receiving stipends in all other provinces. So it's only Gauteng province. So can I be given feedback on this to say they will get stipend that will be backdated from January 2021? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister, for your presentation, to you and your team. I just have a few questions as well. I want to know what the reason is behind deciding to centralize J&J vaccines in rural areas and Pfizer in the metros. It's not quite clear in the presentation what informs the decision to do that. And secondly, and I mean, my colleagues have raised this concern based on technicality and our history in relation to reaching targets. So everything on paper may look quite convincing in the time being, I mean, despite the fact that our aspirations should be much higher. But the concern is, how then do you plan on reaching capacity to process 250,000 vaccines per day when you have failed with vaccinating 1.5 million healthcare workers with the initial target of the end of April? You've extended it and even reduced the plan For healthcare workers, it went to 600,000. Now it's 1.2 million, as I see in the presentation that you gave us today. So there keeps being changes, but none of them lead us towards believing that capacity is being increased, or that you're going to be able to get to a point where you're able to vaccinate 250,000 people per day, especially noting that if we were to break it down from May to October, mid-May to October, you would have to vaccinate, to reach the target that you have set, you would have to vaccinate 700,000 people per week. And I understand that this will increase, obviously, with the securing of more vaccines and them arriving, even though there's questions about the issue of securing and availability and all those things. But you are giving us numbers to say 600,000 per week from May. How then do we then litigate the issue of the fact that to reach the target, it would have to be 700,000 plus people, 700,000 people per week? Especially noting the issue of capacity. You are telling us about vaccination sites and vaccinators, which are being said to be already available and already on site. We are being told about you doing oversight visits to these vaccination sites, but they don't result in a tangible increase that leads us towards believing, or at least seeing tangible evidence that 250,000 vaccinations will be able to be possible per day on phase 2 in particular. So there is a concern about that, because it seems that we are just gearing for another failure, as we have been over the past few months and weeks, of targets being changed because capacity is proving to be a problem, technical issues, vaccinations arriving, not arriving, all those things. And they may seem like small gaps in the presentations and how you guys present this information to us. But as a portfolio committee, I think we know much more better to just take your word for it, because history tells us otherwise, that even if you may bring a plan and tell us we'll vaccinate 1.5 million healthcare workers by the end of April, reality is that you're still on 250,000 and we are in mid-April. And that is very disappointing, to say the least, and it's very concerning, because then it means you won't reach the target that you have set for the second phase of 22 million people by mid-October, just based on the evidence of the work that has been done so far and the targets and all of the failures in the collective. And also, I want to know what the update is on other vaccine manufacturers, because it seems there's a decision that's been made already, and that we must just reach our own conclusions, that you've, as an establishment, as the administration, as the executives, you've just decided on Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, despite the fact that you've been coming in and out of the portfolio committee telling us about the other ones and Sputnik and all those things that were in talks with the other manufacturers. Can we just have an update on what these talks have led to so far? Because we currently don't have that. And yeah, especially in particular in regards to vaccines from China and Russia. And another issue, it's very good that we've decided to halt the J&J vaccination program pending the outcome. But what I want to ask is that what then is being done domestically to involve ourselves in the investigation process? Are we having our own? Are we just waiting for the FDA and the CDC to come up and tell us the results of it? Don't we have our own capacity as a country to either be involved on that level or to have our own investigation beyond just monitoring, but to deeply, be involved? Because part of the conditions, or rather the triggers that have been noted by the FDA, is the issue of the fact that we have to monitor even the very minor symptoms after vaccination, which the Sonke trial has said over and over again that the only symptoms they've had is nausea and muscle pain, but those are also primary symptoms that could lead to blood clots. I want to know if investigations on that level have happened, or you're waiting for people to come and respond and tell you that they've had this particular situation and so on and so forth, in particular to healthcare workers. So I just want to know how intricate and how deeply involved is our monitoring system in relation to the investigation, because I know it will last a few days, and then it may need that the vaccination program can continue or be halted altogether. And that's what is then the return strategy for both instances of government. And another issue, what then becomes the replacement in the interim, and if the results prove that Johnson & Johnson should be halted indefinitely, what then is the strategy? And also when we speak about alternatives of other vaccinations, it's because part and parcel of that is that the gift of that decision is that even in situations where we are found where the primary vaccines that we have chosen, Pfizer, to not be as efficacious, to not have such a high efficacy against the variant first found in South Africa, Johnson & Johnson being investigated, our hands become tied if there isn't a large base or rather a much more alternatives which could be made available. That's why I'm asking for an update, because I want to know what then is the reason why there is no securance, or they are not securing other vaccines like Sputnik and so on and so forth. And maybe the minister could take us into confidence. And the other issue I had raised the last time with the DG, the issue of Mposileka from the senior medical scientist from NICD, who raised issues of racism at the NICD, which also resulted in her being dismissed unfairly. Can I just have an update, because it's been over 2 weeks and I haven't had an update from the DG in relation to this particular issue. And yeah, that is it from me. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, honorable members. From my side, it's just to Minister and the DG to enhance some of the issues that are coming in. Can we agree that in the previous presentation, you did highlight where you are, so that with the Sputnik, Sinopharm, and the Chinese vaccine, can we have that slide remaining right through in your future presentations until you have made a decision whether SAPRA has given you a green light to continue or not continue? Because today it was missing in the previous presentations. That was there, indicating that there are discussions with yourself and SAPRA about that, so that we could always have that slide and to finalize that decision. That was it by Dr. Tembeko. I will appreciate if that slide remains like that right through in your future presentations, especially in the light of not sure whether we are permanently with the two or we need to know the progress. Honorable Kela raised the issue of vaccination sites. I must indicate 2 days ago, I was phoned by a journalist who was saying, do you know about vaccination sites? I said, yes, we do, because in the previous presentations, you made that presentation again about vaccination sites. But it does appear that this has not been well communicated out there. Maybe we have not started. Please indicate. I mean, for instance, if I live next to Tula Mahashi Clinic, is that site going to be available? When do I come to know as to that site will then be? Because right now, as we are almost supposed to be rounding up, giving vaccines to our healthcare workers, we need to be having a massive planning, all that for the rollout of the country. Related to that, one noted there were some glitches with regards to a particular healthcare worker here and there able to register so that he or she is part of this program. Now, do you expect the same for our all 60-year-olds and above, whether they are in the countryside, rural areas and all that, to register into the system so that you know that next to Mankweng, there are so many of those who need to be vaccinated, and down there, how do you see this process going forward? Because we need that information, because these 60-year-olds are all over around us, and I need to be very clear when I provide an answer to them. What would be expected of them prior to being vaccinated? Maybe you can then take us through all these questions, Honorable Minister and your team. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I'm going to request that the members of the team could start. We could ask the DG and maybe Dr. Pillay to come in, and then we've actually got a few, Dr. Tulare, and then the Deputy Minister and myself will come at the end. Maybe if we ask the members to touch on some of the questions, Dr. Anban Pillay, Dr. Tulare, and DG, Then we'll come back to deal with the last questions, myself and Deputy Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I'll request Dr. Anban Pillay and Dr. Tulare to start.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, honourable members. I'll try and address some of the questions that were raised. I think the first question around the adverse events relating to the J&J vaccine. We had not experienced, as the Minister indicated, any of these adverse events that have been reported in the US. But they have certainly been experienced in other countries. Bearing in mind as well that our rollout is close to about 300,000 doses. And in the US, for example, over 6 million doses have been already administered, and they've had 6 cases. I think it's important to say that there hasn't been a causal link as yet between the vaccine and the adverse events. There may well be other factors that have affected that. That's the data that I think the FDA will have a look at and evaluate. I do know that SAPRA is also looking at the matter. At the same time, a number of the ethics committees locally have raised whether the study should proceed in the context of these signals, what we call them adverse event signals that are coming out of other countries, because that does raise for us the concern that these adverse events may occur in South Africa, and so we may need to take measures around that. So I think pausing the study is an opportunity for us to look at whether these adverse events are linked to the vaccine firstly, and if they are, which particular groups are affected, what is the causal relationship, is it a particular type of age group or other factors that the individual has that predisposes them to these types of clots. I think those answers the colleagues in SAPRA as well as the Ministerial Advisory Committee that will be looking at that, and will potentially have some answers or approaches about how we would be able to deal with that. As part of the process of managing safety of vaccines, we have the EVDS system, which requires that all adverse events are recorded on the system. So after registration, after vaccination, there is then a process of monitoring those adverse events as they occur. And the reason that government is managing the rollout and using a single system, which is EVDS, is so that precisely we can get these signals of adverse events early. Because if you have one single system and you notice a particular adverse event popping up all over, that's usually the first signal that there is something that you need to investigate here and try and understand. So I think our EVDS would certainly be able to pick these up if they occur. I mean, the other adverse events that may arise that we're not aware of currently. I think the temporary suspension would hopefully only be a very short time, because it would be required that we investigate each of these and then make a decision about how we continue with the vaccine if that's the decision. In terms of the contractual agreement with Pfizer, if we choose not to procure further doses of the if we choose not to procure further doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, clearly if there is no good reason why we're not doing that, we will still be committed for the financial implications that are in the contract currently. So we would have to make sure that we engage Johnson & Johnson if we go that route, and we'd have to be the same mind about that. But I think this is very early days, because this is simply a pausing of the study. There's been no adverse events in South Africa. We don't know if these adverse events are actually linked to the vaccine, or they are other risk factors. I think there are a number of other risk factors that cause adverse events, and we would need to establish that first. In terms of the Pfizer vaccine, it did have challenges, but I think all of these challenges that came up in Europe particularly were investigated, and in each case it was found that these adverse events were not related to the vaccine. They were related largely to the other comorbidities that individuals had. Remember, in Europe at the time when these adverse events arose, they were largely in the elderly who have a number of other comorbidities. So when an adverse event occurs and an individual is vaccinated, the cautionary approach is to say these adverse events are related to the vaccine until an investigation is done. So I think that's the way most regulators and countries approach this matter until a causal link is actually established. To try and explain this concept of secured versus received vaccines, etc., what the companies require us to do as soon as we agree on the number of doses, etc., is to sign what they call a term sheet. That term sheet contains the doses that will be supplied, the price that will be supplied, in very broad terms. That effectively secures the doses. So when we talk about doses being secured, we're talking about signing off on the term sheet. After the term sheet has been signed, they then come with a very detailed agreement, and that agreement covers a number of parameters that were not necessarily in the term sheet. And we then have to sign off on that agreement before they would supply the doses. Even though you've secured the dose and the price earlier, they will not ship any doses to a country until those conditions are met and there's agreement on them. Some of the conditions, as Minister has indicated, are very onerous. Under normal circumstances in our usual contracts with pharmaceutical companies, we would not agree to those conditions, but we're in a very peculiar situation where we have great need for the vaccine and would have to then relook at those conditions with that context in mind. So once the agreement is signed, we then receive, as part of the agreement, we get information about the delivery dates of those vaccines. But the delivery dates are not specific days, so they don't tell you on this date in May or June or July. You only get those dates after you pay your first deposit, and following that you then get some sense about what those dates could be. But those dates are not firm, as the companies say to us. We have to. Hello,
Dr. Pillay, do you have a challenge to have your video on?
Yeah, my what do you call it? Signal is not very good, so that's why I'd switched it off.
Okay, that is fine. Okay, you can continue then. Sorry, then.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Then on the issue relating to the truncated supply from Pfizer. I think it's important to say that Pfizer's trying to give us as many doses as they can in Q2 based on our request. And so these are kind of doses that they can release on a weekly basis. Our capacity to store is certainly much greater than that, but clearly their demand way exceeds that at a global level. And so this is what they're able to provide in small quantities over the several weeks that they're able to deliver doses to us. So we obviously are happy to receive that, because it certainly helps, particularly in Q2, where we're looking at trying to vaccinate as many of the high risk groups during that time. I think, Chair, it's important on the Sisonke study to make the very important point that the Sisonke study is regulated by SAPRA in terms of the number of sites it has and the way it conducts its study. As a consequence, there are very